On the morning of March 7, 2019, Corrine Purcell and her husband Shep boarded a dive boat called the Kailani Blue off the coast of Maui. They'd been married for 6 days. By noon, they were gone. Not missing in the way people usually go missing. No argument at a hotel, no rental car found at a cliff's edge, no note left on a nightstand. They went into the water with 10 other divers and a crew of 4. They did not come back up. 14 months later, a wetsuit washed ashore on a beach in Molokai, 16 miles from where they disappeared. The neoprene was sun-bleached and barnacle-crusted, barely recognizable as something a person had worn. Inside, stitched into the lining with what forensic analysts later determined was a length of fishing line and a bent fishhook, was a note. The note was written on a strip of waterproof fabric, the kind used in sail repair kits. The handwriting was small, careful, and steady. It belonged to Corrine Purcell. What it said would dismantle everything investigators thought they knew about what happened that morning on the Kailani Blue. It would end one person's career, destroy 2 families, and leave questions that remain unanswered 5 years later. But before the note, before the wetsuit, before the search that consumed 3 federal agencies and the full resources of the Maui County Police Department, before any of that, there was a wedding. And it was, by all accounts, a happy one. Welcome back to another video on my channel. To protect the victims, the names and places in this story have been slightly changed. If you have a story of your own to share, make sure to do so using the link down below. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Corrine Elise Purcell was born Corrine Elise Macedo in Kailua Kona on the Big Island of Hawaii in 1991. She was the middle child of 3 sisters, Noelani the oldest, Leilani the youngest, Corrine the quiet one in between. Their father, Manny Macedo, ran a fishing charter out of Hanakauhau Harbor. Their mother, Diane, taught 4th grade at Kealakea Elementary for 27 years. Corrine grew up in the water the way mainland children grow up in backyards. She could free dive to 40 feet by the time she was 12. She got her open water scuba certification at 14, the minimum age, and her advanced certification 3 months later. Her father said she was part monk seal. She'd rather be underwater than anywhere else. Corrine didn't talk much on land, her sister Noelani said later in one of the few interviews she gave. She was shy. She'd sit at dinner and let Leilani do all the talking, but you'd put her in the water and she just opened up. She'd point at things. She'd grab your arm and pull you over to see some little fish hiding in the coral. She was a different person down there. The real one, maybe. She was compact, 5'2", with her father's dark hair and her mother's freckles. She had a tattoo of a manta ray on her left shoulder blade that she'd gotten at 17 without permission. Diane didn't speak to her for a week. She bit her nails. She made her own jewelry from sea glass and gave it away to anyone who admired it. She kept a journal, had since she was 9, filling composition notebooks with small, precise handwriting, the same handwriting that would later be found inside a wetsuit. After high school, she studied marine biology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, graduated with honors, and took a job with a coral reef monitoring project on Maui. She rented a studio apartment in Keihei, a mile from the beach, and lived the kind of life that looks modest from the outside, but felt to her exactly right. She dove 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes for work, sometimes just because. She called her mother every Sunday. She was 27 years old and had never been off the islands. Shepherd Shep Purcell was from Decatur, Georgia. He was 31 when they met, 6'1", sandy-haired, with the kind of easy, open-faced friendliness that made strangers trust him immediately. He sold medical equipment for a company based in Atlanta. He'd come to Maui on vacation with 2 college friends, a trip they'd been planning for a year. He met Corrine at a beach bar in Keauhai on his 2nd night. She was there with a co-worker, drinking a single beer that she'd been nursing for an hour. Shep bought her a 2nd one. She didn't drink it, but she stayed to talk to him. Later, she told Noelani that what she noticed first was his hands, big, careful hands that he kept folded on the bar like he was trying to take up less space. He was loud, Noelani said. Corrine was quiet. It shouldn't have worked, but he got quiet around her and she got a little louder. They met in the middle, I guess. They dated long distance for a year. Shep flew to Maui once a month, sometimes twice. He learned to dive, not well by Corrine's standards, but competently. He was a cautious diver, methodical, the kind who checked his equipment 3 times before entering the water. Corrine teased him about it. "You'd check the parachute on a paper airplane," she told him once, a line her co-worker Rina Takahashi remembered and repeated to investigators. He proposed on the beach at Makana at sunset with a ring he'd bought in Atlanta and carried in his pocket for 3 flights because he kept losing his nerve. She said yes before he finished the question. They married on March 1st, 2019, at a small ceremony at the Maui tropical plantation. 46 guests. Corrine wore a white sundress and plumeria in her hair. Shep cried during the vows and didn't try to hide it. In the photographs, later reproduced endlessly, in newspapers, on television, on websites that traffic in exactly this kind of story, they look incandescently happy, not performing happiness, living inside it. The honeymoon was simple. A week on Maui, the place Corrine already lived, the place Shep was learning to love. They planned to dive every day. Shep's skills had improved, and Corrine wanted to show him her favorite sites: Molokini Crater, Honolulu Bay, 5 Graves. On March 7th, day 6 of the honeymoon, they booked a morning dive with an outfit called Pacific Kailani Charters, which operated a 42-foot catamaran called the Kailani Blue out of Malia Harbor. 2-tank dive, departing at 7 a.m., returning by noon. Standard tourist operation. They'd done similar trips before. Shep twice, Corrine dozens of times. It would be their last morning together, or the last morning anyone could account for. What "together" meant after that is one of the questions the note would raise and not fully answer. The Kailani Blue was owned and operated by a man named Keone Villanueva, 44, a Maui native who'd been running dive charters for 19 years. He had an unblemished safety record. His boat was Coast Guard inspected and certified. He employed 3 crew members, his deckhand, a 23-year-old named Bryce Oka, a dive master named Tanya Resser, 36 with over 3,000 log dives, and a second dive master, Oren Kaiahue, 29, relatively new to the operation, but certified and experienced. 12 divers boarded the Kailani Blue that morning, the Purcells, a retired couple from Scottsdale, Bernard and Francine Moore, a group of 4 friends from Portland, 2 men, 2 women, all advanced divers on an annual trip, and 4 solo travelers, a Japanese tourist named Yuki Hasegawa, a Canadian woman named Brigitte Coulombe, a college student from UC San Diego named Dax Ontiveros, and a man who signed the waiver as R. Trask and listed a Honolulu address. The weather that morning was clear. Winds light, out of the northeast at 8 knots. Sea state calm, 1 to 2 foot swells. Visibility estimated at 80 to 100 feet. By every measurable standard, conditions were ideal. The first dive was at Molokini Crater, the crescent-shaped volcanic remnant 2.5 miles off the coast. The Kailani Blue moored inside the crater at approximately 7:45 a.m. All 12 divers entered the water. Tanya Resser led the group along the inside wall at a depth of 40 to 60 feet. Oren Kaiahue followed at the rear. The dive lasted approximately 45 minutes. All 12 divers returned to the boat. Shep Purcell later told Bryce Oka that the dive was incredible, that he'd never seen so many fish in his life. Corrine said nothing, but she was smiling. Bryce remembered that specifically. He remembered her sitting on the stern platform, pulling off her fins, face tipped up toward the sun, smiling with her eyes closed. That image would stay with him for years. It was the last time anyone could confirm seeing both of them alive. The second dive site was different. Instead of the sheltered inside of Molokini, Keone piloted the Kailani Blue around to the crater's back wall, a spot known among experienced divers as the backside, or more ominously, the back wall. This is the outer face of the crater, dropping steeply into deep water. Currents here are stronger and less predictable than inside. Depths along the wall range from 30 feet to over 300. The open ocean lies beyond, nothing between the wall and the deep Pacific. The backside is not considered dangerous for experienced divers in good conditions. It is, however, a site where the margin for error narrows. If a current catches you and pulls you away from the wall, you can find yourself in open water with nothing beneath you but blue. Dive operations routinely take groups here, but with enhanced safety protocols. Closer buddy pairs, shorter bottom times, a crew member in the water as a safety diver. Keone briefed the divers before the second descent. Stay close to the wall. Watch your depth. If the current picks up, abort and surface. Maximum depth 70 feet, maximum bottom time 35 minutes. Everyone signed the briefing acknowledgement form. 11 divers entered the water. Francine Moore, from the Scottsdale couple, opted to sit out the second dive. She was tired, she said, and wanted to snorkel inside the crater instead. She stayed on the boat with Bryce Oka. 11 divers in the water, Tanya Resser leading, Oren Kaihue at the rear. 33 minutes later, Tanya surfaced with 9 divers. Oren surfaced 30 seconds after. Corrine and Shep Purcell were not with them. The first minutes after a diver fails to surface are governed by protocol, not panic. Tanya Resser initiated a recount. She asked the remaining divers, "When did you last see them? Where?" The answers were vague and contradictory. Bernard Moore thought he'd seen the couple near the middle of the dive, swimming close to the wall at about 50 feet. Dax Ontiveros thought he'd seen them toward the end, deeper, maybe 70 feet, maybe 80. Yuki Hasegawa hadn't noticed them at all. The Portland group had been focused on each other. Oren Kaihue, whose job was to watch the rear of the group, said something that would become significant. He said the Purcells had been swimming at the back with him for the first 10 minutes. Then, they'd moved ahead toward the middle of the group, and he'd lost visual contact. "I wasn't worried," he told investigators. "They were experienced. She was definitely experienced. They were a buddy pair. They had each other." Tanya Resser went back in the water within 4 minutes, alone, retracing the dive route along the wall. She searched for 20 minutes. She found no sign of them, no bubbles, no equipment, no bodies. Keone Villanueva radioed the Coast Guard at 10:17 a.m. 2 divers missing, backside of Molokini. Last seen underwater approximately 35 to 40 minutes ago. The math was immediate and cruel. A standard recreational tank holds enough air for 45 to 60 minutes of diving, depending on depth and exertion. If the Purcells had surfaced somewhere out of sight, carried by a current perhaps, they might be floating on the surface, alive, waiting. If they hadn't surfaced, they were already dead. The Coast Guard launched a helicopter from Air Station Barbers Point on Oahu and diverted a cutter already conducting exercises southeast of Maui. Maui Fire Department dispatched jet skis and a rescue boat. The search area was initially set at a 2-mile radius around Molokini, then expanded to 5, then 10. They searched for the rest of that day, through the night with spotlights, and for 6 more days after. They found nothing. No bodies, no equipment, no signal from the emergency locator beacons that modern BCDs are equipped with, though investigators later confirmed that neither Corrine's nor Shep's rented BCD had a functional beacon. The rental company, Island Dive Supply, confirmed the units were older models that hadn't been upgraded. No trace of Corrine and Shep Purcell was found in more than 1,600 square miles of ocean. The investigation was initially handled by the Maui County Police Department with Coast Guard coordination. Within the first week, it took on a character that investigators found frustrating and families found unbearable. It was, at first blush, simply a diving accident. Terrible, tragic, but not uncommon. Divers die every year in Hawaii, about 5 to 8 annually, usually tourists, usually from medical events or panic at depth. The prevailing theory was straightforward. One of them, probably Shep, the less experienced diver, had encountered a problem. Equipment malfunction, unexpected current, or rapid descent. Corrine, his buddy, would have tried to help. In the process, both were swept off the wall and into deep water, or one panicked and the other couldn't compensate, or a dozen other scenarios that end the same way. Detective Mail Kanahil, assigned to lead the investigation, was methodical and cautious. She was 41, a 12-year veteran of the department, born and raised in Wailuku. She had worked 2 previous diving deaths, both accidental, both resolved quickly. In most cases, Kanahele told the Purcell and Macedo families during their first meeting, the ocean tells us what happened eventually. Equipment washes ashore, a body surfaces, we get answers. I know that's not comfort right now, but the ocean gives things back. She believed this. She had reason to. In both her previous cases, remains had been recovered within weeks. But the Purcells were different. Days turned into weeks. Nothing surfaced. The ocean kept whatever it had taken. Manny Macedo, Corrine's father, flew from the Big Island on March 8th and didn't go home for 3 months. He sat in the harbor every morning at dawn, watching the boats go out, waiting for someone to radio in a discovery. He called Kanahil so often that she started picking up on the first ring, just so he wouldn't have to wait. Manny Macedo was the most patient man I've ever met, Kanahil said later, and the most persistent. He'd call and say, "Anything today?" I'd say no. He'd say, "Okay, tomorrow then." Every single day. He never raised his voice. He never demanded. He just kept calling. Diane couldn't bring herself to come. She stayed in Kona by the phone and unraveled. Noelani said her mother stopped eating for the first week, then ate compulsively, then stopped again. She stopped teaching. She stopped leaving the house. She would sit at the kitchen table and fold and refold the same dish towel for hours. Grief without a body is a different kind of animal, Noelani said. You can't bury anyone. You can't have a service that feels real. You're just suspended, waiting for permission to fall apart, and the permission never comes. Shep's family, his parents, Gail and Don Purcell, and his older brother Trent, flew in from Georgia. Gail Purcell was a school administrator, composed and precise, the kind of woman who processes catastrophe by organizing it. She made lists. She called the Coast Guard daily. She requested transcripts of every radio communication from the morning of March 7th. Don Purcell was the opposite. He arrived, looked at the ocean from the harbor, and went quiet. He stayed quiet for most of the next 2 weeks. Trent Purcell later told a reporter that his father said only one thing during that time that he remembered. They were standing on the dock watching a search boat return. "The thing I keep thinking," Don said, "is that he finally learned to dive. He did that for her. He was scared of the water when he was a kid, wouldn't go past his waist, and he learned to dive because she loved it." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. 3 weeks into the investigation, Detective Kanahili began looking more closely at the crew of the Kailani Blue. Not because she suspected foul play, the logistics of harming 2 divers underwater in a group of 11 seemed nearly impossible, but because the question of supervision nagged at her. 11 divers in the water, 2 dive masters, the back wall of Molokini, where currents run and depths plunge, and somehow 2 people vanished without anyone noticing until the dive was over. She started with Oren Kaihue, the rear dive master. Oren was cooperative, earnest, visibly shaken. He'd been diving professionally for only 2 years. Before that, he'd worked construction in Kahului. He'd gotten into dive work because it paid better and he loved the ocean, a common story on Maui. His account was consistent across 3 interviews. The Purcells had been at the back of the group with him for the first 10 minutes. Corrine was confident, relaxed, clearly in her element. Shep was fine, a little heavy on his air consumption, checking his gauges frequently but competent. Then they'd moved ahead and Oren had focused on other divers at the rear. "I should have stayed with them," he told Kanahili during their second interview. He was crying. "I know I should have. But Tanya was up front, and I figured they were heading toward her. I figured she had them." Tanya Resser's account matched. She hadn't seen the Purcells during the dive at all. She'd been focused on the front of the group, monitoring depth and proximity to the wall. She assumed Oren had them, a gap, a handoff that never happened. 2 professionals, each assuming the other had eyes on the same people. Keone Villanueva was devastated. He'd never lost a diver. His safety record was his identity, his livelihood, his pride. He cooperated fully, handed over all logs, maintenance records, dive briefing forms. Everything was in order, everything was by the book, except the BCD beacons. The rental equipment the Purcells had used came from Island Dive Supply, not from the Kailani Blue's own inventory. Keone's boats carried properly equipped BCDs, but the Purcells had brought their own rented gear. No one had checked whether the rental BCDs had functional emergency locators. "That's not standard practice," Keone told Kanahili. "We check our own gear. If someone brings their own or rents from somewhere else, we check certifications and basic functionality. We don't audit every component." "Maybe you should," Kanahili said. Keone didn't respond. Island Dive Supply, when contacted, confirmed that the two BCDs rented to the Purcells were older models, Scuba Pro Hydros, circa 2009, that had never been retrofitted with emergency locators. The owner, a man named Wade Ferreira, said this was common for rental fleets. "You want top-of-the-line gear, you buy your own," Ferreira said, a statement that appeared in Kanahele's report and later in a lawsuit filed by the Macedo family. By the 2-month mark, the investigation had settled into an uncomfortable stasis. No bodies, no equipment, no evidence of foul play, no evidence of anything, really, except absence. The working theory remained accidental drowning, likely current-related. A reconstruction dive by the Coast Guard at the backside of Molokini confirmed that currents on the day in question had been running south-southwest at approximately 1.2 knots, stronger than typical but within normal range. Strong enough, however, to carry a diver away from the wall if they weren't paying attention. Strong enough to create a problem that, once started, would compound quickly. The scenario Kanahele assembled was plausible, if unprovable. At some point during the dive, one or both Purcells drifted away from the wall and into the current. By the time they realized they were being carried, they were in open water. If they surfaced, they'd have been visible from the boat, unless the boat wasn't looking. If they stayed down, trying to fight back to the wall, they'd have burned through their air. Either way, the ocean took them. "I don't like it," Kanahele told her supervisor, Lieutenant Akoni Fong. "It fits, but it doesn't satisfy." "Most cases don't satisfy," Fong said. He wasn't wrong. But Kanahele couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something, not something dramatic, not a hidden murder or conspiracy, just a detail. A small thing that didn't fit, but that she hadn't found yet. She kept the case open. She kept taking Manny Macedo's calls. She kept looking. And then, on May 11th, 2020, 14 months and 4 days after the Purcells disappeared, a retired schoolteacher named Fumiko Sato went for her morning walk on Pohaku Maliuli Beach on the southeast coast of Molokai and found something tangled in the rocks at the waterline. It didn't look like a wetsuit at first. It looked like a dead animal, dark, shapeless, encrusted with barnacles and algae. Fumiko almost walked past it. She was 71 years old and had lived on Molokai for 38 of those years. She'd found strange things on the beach before: Japanese fishing floats, a prosthetic leg, once a sealed Tupperware container holding $300 in cash, and a note that read, "For whoever finds this." The island collected things the ocean discarded. She poked at the mass with her walking stick. It was soft, not a carcass. She pulled it partially free from the rocks and saw the zipper. A wetsuit, women's, based on the size, small, maybe extra small. Black with coral pink accents along the seams that were barely visible under the growth. The neoprene was degraded, stiff in some places and crumbling in others. Whatever body it had once contained was long gone. Fumiko brought it home. She wasn't sure why. Something about it bothered her, something beyond the obvious strangeness. She rinsed it with a garden hose, and as the salt and debris washed away, she noticed something. The inside lining of the suit just below the left breast had been altered. A small pocket, not factory-made, clearly hand-stitched, had been created by folding a section of the inner lining back on itself and securing it with tight, even stitches. The thread wasn't thread. It was fishing line, monofilament, clear, the kind you'd find on any boat. Inside the pocket was a piece of fabric, folded twice. Waterproof sail repair fabric, approximately 4 inches by 6 inches. Fumiko unfolded it carefully. There was writing on it. Small, precise, cramped but legible. Written in what appeared to be permanent marker, the kind rated for marine use, the kind that doesn't wash away. Fumiko couldn't read all of it. Some of the letters had degraded, but she could read enough to understand that she was holding something that shouldn't exist. She could read the first line clearly. "My name is Corrine Purcell, and I am alive." Fumiko Sato sat down on her lanai with the wetsuit in her lap and the note in her hands. She read what she could. Then she picked up the phone and called the police. She was crying. She couldn't say why exactly. She didn't know this woman. She didn't know the story. She just knew that someone had written these words in a place where no one was supposed to be able to write anything, using materials that suggested desperation and ingenuity in equal measure. and had sent them out into the ocean inside a wetsuit like a message in a bottle. Except bottles are hopeful. This didn't feel hopeful. This felt like something else entirely. "I think someone needs to see this," Fumiko told the dispatcher. "I think someone has been waiting for this." She was right. Several people had been waiting, and what the note contained would make the waiting worse, not better. Would transform an accidental drowning into something far more complicated, far more disturbing, and far less resolved. But that was still hours away. At that moment, on a quiet beach on Molokai, a 71-year-old retired schoolteacher held a dead woman's words in her hands and understood, with the certainty of someone who has lived long enough to recognize such things, that she was holding grief made physical. Grief and something else. Something that had survived 14 months in the Pacific Ocean, stitched into neoprene with a fishhook, written in handwriting that did not shake. Whatever Corrine Purcell had been when she wrote those words, she had not been panicking. She had been precise. She had been deliberate. She had been trying to tell someone something specific. And now, 14 months too late, someone was listening. The note reached Detective Kanahele's hands at 4:17 p.m. the same day. Molokai police had photographed it, sealed it in an evidence bag, and flown it to Maui on a Makani Kai commuter flight, escorted by a young officer who held the bag on his lap the entire way, because he didn't trust the overhead compartment. Kanahele read it in her office with the door closed. She read it 3 times. Then she called Lieutenant Fong and told him to clear his evening. The note was not a farewell. It was not a confession. It was an accusation. What could be reconstructed? Roughly 60% of the text was legible, the rest degraded beyond recovery. Said this: "My name is Corrine Purcell, and I am alive. I don't know today's date. I think it's been 4 or 5 days since the dive. I am on land. I am being held. I was not lost. I was taken from the water by someone on the boat. Shep is dead. I saw him die. The person who did this is..." The next section was illegible. Salt damage, ink degradation, a fold in the fabric that had worn through entirely. Roughly 15 to 20 words gone. The note resumed. "Told me no one would look because they think we drowned. He said the ocean doesn't give people back. He's wrong. I'm giving myself back. If you find this, my father is Manny Macedo in Kailua Kona. Tell him I tried. Tell my mother I'm sorry about the manta ray tattoo. She'll know what that means." Then a final line, separated from the rest by a gap, written in letters slightly larger than the others. "I don't think I'm getting out of this, but I want someone to know what happened. We didn't drown. He killed my husband, and he took me, and I am." The note ended there. Whether Corrine had been interrupted or had run out of space or had simply been unable to finish the sentence, no one could determine. The fabric had no more writing on it. The last word was am. Present tense, unfinished, a life still in progress at the moment the pen stopped. Kanahele sat with that word for a long time. Am, not was. At the moment of writing, Corrine Purcell had still been alive, somewhere on land, being held by someone from the boat, the question of which someone would consume the next 11 months. The note changed everything and clarified nothing. It transformed the case from a probable accident into a confirmed homicide and abduction. But the critical identification, the name of the perpetrator, was in the section the ocean had erased. Kanahele assembled a task force within 48 hours. FBI joined because the case now involved suspected kidnapping. Coast Guard Investigative Service joined because the crime had occurred in federal waters. The Maui County Prosecutor's Office assigned their most experienced attorney, a woman named Della Ching, who had never lost a homicide case in 17 years. 14 people on the crew and passenger manifest. One of them, according to Corrine's note, had killed Shep Purcell underwater, abducted Corrine, and held her on land for at least 4 or 5 days. Kanahele started eliminating. Francine Moore had stayed on the boat during the second dive. Bryce Oka had been on the boat with her. Both confirmed each other's presence. Neither had entered the water. Eliminated. Bernard Moore, 72 years old, 5'7", arthritic in both knees. He'd been diving at the front of the group with Tanya Resser. 3 other divers confirmed his position throughout the dive. Eliminated. The Portland group, all 4 had been diving together, maintaining visual contact, and had surface interval photographs time-stamped on a GoPro that placed them on the boat before and after the dive at the correct times. Eliminated. Yuki Hasegawa had flown back to Osaka 2 days after the disappearance. Japanese authorities confirmed his presence at his workplace continuously since March 12th. His dive computer, which logged depth and time automatically, showed a profile consistent with staying near the wall at moderate depth for the entire dive. Eliminated. Brigitte Coulombe, the Canadian woman, had a dive computer that told a similar story. She'd also spoken at length with Dax Ontiveros during the surface interval, and he confirmed she'd been visibly shaken by the Purcells' disappearance. She'd been crying on the boat during the search. Eliminated. Dax Ontiveros himself was 20 years old, 140 pounds, diving on a student budget with borrowed equipment. His dive computer showed a maximum depth of 51 feet. He'd been in Maui for 6 days, staying at a hostel where his presence was logged nightly. He had no boat, no vehicle, no property on the islands, nowhere to hold someone. Eliminated. That left 3 people: Keone Villanueva, Tanya Resser, Oren Kaihue, and the man who'd signed the waiver as R. Trask. R. Trask did not exist. The address listed on the waiver, a street number on Kapahulu Avenue in Honolulu, corresponded to a laundromat. The phone number was a prepaid burner, disconnected. The emergency contact name was N. Trask, with the same phone number. No one named R. Trask held a valid dive certification with any recognized agency. No one by that name had a Hawaii driver's license, a state ID, or a credit card on file with any hotel on Maui. Bryce Oka remembered him vaguely. Medium height, medium build, baseball cap, dark sunglasses, quiet, kept to himself. Paid cash for the dive. $189, 2 20s, and the rest in 10s and 5s, which Bryce remembered because it took a while to count. No one else remembered him at all. The Portland group couldn't pick him out of a photo lineup. Bernard Moore thought maybe he'd been on the boat, maybe not. Dax Ontiveros said, "There was a guy, I think, in a dark rash guard." A man had boarded a boat with 12 other people, spent 5 hours in close proximity to them, and left almost no impression whatsoever. He was the kind of person you looked at and immediately forgot. Whether this was natural or cultivated, Kanahil couldn't say, but it chilled her. "Someone planned this," she told Della Ching. "This wasn't opportunistic. You don't bring a fake name and cash to a dive boat by accident. Someone planned to take a person off that boat, and they knew exactly how to not be remembered." "Can you prove that?" Ching asked. "Not yet." "Then keep working." Kanahele turned to the 3 crew members, not because she believed one of them was R. Trask, but because the note said someone on the boat, and the crew had the most access, the most knowledge of the dive site, and the most ability to manipulate what happened underwater. Tanya Reeser was investigated thoroughly. Her financials were clean. Her personal life was stable. She lived with her partner, a woman named Jill, in Haiku. She had no criminal record, no history of violence, no connection to the Purcells or the Macedos. Her dive computer confirmed she'd been at the front of the group for the entire dive, at depths between 45 and 65 feet. She physically could not have been at the back of the group where the Purcells were last seen. Keone Villanueva had been on the boat, piloting. He hadn't been in the water at all during the second dive. Multiple witnesses confirmed this. Oren Kaihue, Oren, who'd been at the back. Oren, who'd lost visual contact with the Purcells. Oren, who'd assumed Tanya had them while Tanya assumed he did. Kanahil brought him in for a 4th interview. His story hadn't changed. That was either a sign of truthfulness or a sign of careful rehearsal. And after 12 years of investigations, Kanahele knew she couldn't always tell the difference. He was consistent, detailed, and emotional. He cried during every interview. He blamed himself openly, repeatedly. He'd quit diving entirely after the disappearance and was working at a hardware store in Kahului. His dive computer showed a profile that raised questions. For the first 10 minutes, his depth and position were consistent with being at the rear of the group, near the wall. Then, between minutes 10 and 14, his depth increased sharply, from 55 feet to 91 feet. He stayed at that depth for approximately 3 minutes. Then, he ascended back to 60 feet and remained near the wall for the rest of the dive. 91 feet. below the briefed maximum of 70, below where any of the other divers had gone. When Kanahele asked him about it, Oren said he'd dropped down to look at a white-tip reef shark resting on a ledge. He'd been quick about it, down and back. He acknowledged he shouldn't have exceeded the brief depth. "That's when you lost the Purcells?" Kanahele asked. "I don't know," Oren said. "Maybe, probably. I went down to see the shark, and when I came back up, they weren't behind me anymore. 3 minutes at 91 feet. It was a big shark." Kanahele didn't smile. 3 minutes is a long time to look at a shark, Oren. I know. I screwed up. I've said that from the beginning. I looked away, and they were gone." His financial records showed nothing unusual. His phone records showed nothing unusual. He had no boat, no second property, nowhere to hold someone. He'd been at his apartment on the night of March 7th. His roommate confirmed it. But the roommate, when pressed, admitted he'd been asleep by 10 p.m. and hadn't actually seen Oren until the following morning. A gap. Everything about this case lived in gaps. The investigation spent months chasing R. Trask. The FBI's Digital Forensics Unit attempted to trace the burner phone, purchased at a Walmart in Honolulu, activated once, used for the single call to book the dive, and never turned on again. Surveillance footage from the Walmart showed a figure in a baseball cap and sunglasses purchasing the phone with cash. The footage was low resolution, shot from above. The figure could have been anyone. Harbor cameras at Maui captured passengers boarding the Kailani Blue that morning. R. Trask was visible in 2 frames, both partially obscured, once by another passenger, once by the boat's canopy. Dark rash guard, dark board shorts, baseball cap, sunglasses. Approximate height 5'9" to 5'11". Build average, race indeterminate, a ghost. A man who had constructed his own invisibility with such care that even the cameras couldn't hold him. Kanahele expanded the search. She pulled rental car records, hotel registrations, airline manifests, anyone arriving on Maui in the week before March 7th who couldn't be accounted for. The list was enormous. Maui receives over 20,000 visitors a week. Finding one man who didn't want to be found was like searching for a particular grain of sand on the beach where Fumiko Sato had found the wetsuit. He knew, Kanahele said to Fong during one of their late-night sessions, the conference room littered with coffee cups and printouts. He knew the site. He knew the currents. He knew that 2 dive masters with 11 divers would have gaps in coverage. He knew the rental BCDs wouldn't have locator beacons. He knew exactly how to make 2 people disappear underwater. "That sounds like a diver," Fong said. "That sounds like a diver who knows Molokini, who knows the backside, who knows how charter operations work. That's a lot of people on this island." "I know. Are you looking at Kai Hue?" "I'm looking at everyone." She was looking hardest at Kai Hue. She couldn't help it. The dive computer anomaly, the 3-minute gap at 91 feet, the handoff that never happened. But she had no physical evidence, no forensic link, no motive, and no way to place him with Corrine after the dive. And there was the problem of the note itself, someone on the boat. If Corrine had known her captor's name, she'd have written it. If she'd been able to identify him, she would have. The damage section might have contained a name, but it might also have contained a description, a guess, an uncertainty. The note was precise in what it asserted. She was alive. She was being held. Shep was dead. It was someone from the boat. It did not say she knew who, which meant her captor might have concealed his identity from her. Kept her blindfolded, perhaps. Kept her in a place where she couldn't see him. Or, and this possibility disturbed Kanahele more than any other, it meant R. Trask was someone Corrine had never seen before that morning. A stranger who had selected her for reasons she couldn't understand and didn't know. That thought, the randomness of it, the selectiveness disguised as randomness, kept Kanahele awake on the nights when the case files couldn't. 11 months after the note was found, Kanahele got her break. It came not from forensics or digital tracing, but from the oldest investigative method there is. Someone talked. A woman named Polani Keawe walked into the Maui County Police Department on April 3, 2021, and asked to speak with whoever was handling the Purcell case. She was 34, a housekeeper at a vacation rental company, and she was shaking so badly the desk officer brought her water before she'd said a word. She'd been cleaning a property in Napili, a small cottage rented month to month by a man she knew only as Russell. She'd cleaned it every 2 weeks for 7 months, starting in August 2019. The man was quiet, polite, paid in cash, and asked that she not come without calling first. In February 2021, the man had stopped paying rent and vanished. The property owner asked Puolani to do a deep clean for the next tenant. In the bedroom closet, behind a false panel, she discovered when she noticed the wall sounded hollow, she found a space roughly 4 feet by 6 feet. The space contained a sleeping bag, a bucket, a jug of water, and scratches on the inside of the panel, scratches that looked like they had been made by fingernails. She also found, wedged into a crack in the concrete floor, a small piece of sea glass, green, drilled through the center as if for a necklace. Puolani had followed the Purcell case. Everyone on Maui had. She remembered the detail from an early news report. Corrine Purcell made jewelry from sea glass and gave it away. She didn't touch anything. She closed the closet. She drove straight to the police station. The cottage in Napili became the center of the largest forensic operation in Maui County history. FBI evidence response team members flew in from Honolulu. The hidden space was processed over 4 days. Corrine Purcell's DNA was found on the sleeping bag. Her fingerprints were on the wall, the bucket, and the inside of the false panel. The scratches on the panel were consistent with prolonged, repeated attempts to open it from inside. She had been there, alive after the dive, held in a space barely large enough to lie down in. The note's claim was confirmed. She had not drowned. She had been taken. The property had been rented under the name Russell Trask, paid in cash. The rental agreement listed the same disconnected burner number. The property owner, an 80-year-old man living in California, had never met the tenant. Everything was handled by a local management company that had accepted the cash payments without verifying identity. R. Trask, Russell Trask. A name chosen for its blandness, used twice, then discarded. Kanahele now had a crime scene. She had DNA confirmation. She had proof of captivity. What she didn't have was a suspect she could name, arrest, or find. The trail went cold at the cottage's front door. No fingerprints that matched anyone in any database. No DNA other than Corrine's and Puolani's. Russell Trask had lived in that house for months and left behind no biological trace of himself. He'd wiped it clean with the same meticulous care he'd used to board a dive boat and disappear 2 people from the ocean. The case remains open. Kanahele retired in 2023 but consults informally. She still takes Manny Maceto's calls, though they come weekly now instead of daily. Manny is 71. He still lives in Kona. He still fishes, though less often. He keeps a photograph of Corrine on the dashboard of his truck, her at 16, sitting on the bow of his charter boat, sunburned, laughing at something outside the frame. Diane Macedo died in 2022 of a stroke. Noelani believes the stroke was just the final thing, that her mother had been dying since March 7, 2019, slowly, in ways that don't show up on medical charts. Leilani, the youngest, moved to the mainland afterward. Portland. She doesn't talk about her sister. Gail Purcell still sends emails to the FBI field office in Honolulu every month asking for updates. The responses are polite, formulaic, and contain no new information. Don Purcell had a heart attack in 2021 and survived diminished. He no longer travels. Trent Purcell gave one interview in 2022 to a journalist writing a long-form piece for a national magazine. He said the thing that stays with him isn't the loss itself, but the incompleteness of it. "We can't grieve right," Trent said. "We grieved Shep. We know he's gone. But Corrine, her body was never found. She was alive after the dive, we know that now. How long was she alive? What happened to her? Is there any chance at all?" He stopped. He knew the answer. Everyone did. But the sentence hovered there, unfinished, the same way Corrine's note ended with AM. Oren Kaihue was never charged. He cooperated fully throughout the investigation, submitted voluntarily to DNA testing, which did not match any evidence from the cottage, and passed 2 polygraph examinations. He lives in Kahului. He works at the hardware store. He doesn't go near the water. Keone Villanueva sold the Kailani Blue in 2020. He stopped running charters. The lawsuit filed by the Macedo family was settled out of court, along with a separate suit against Island Dive Supply for an undisclosed amount. Keone told an acquaintance that the money didn't matter, that what mattered was that two people got on his boat trusting him to bring them back, and he didn't. Tanya Reeser still dives. She left charter work and teaches scuba at a resort in Ka'anapali. She counts her divers obsessively, before, during, after. Her students think she's strict. She doesn't explain why. The piece of sea glass found in the cottage was confirmed to be hand-drilled, consistent with Corrine's jewelry-making techniques. Nolani identified it as something Corrine might have made, though she couldn't be certain. Corrine made dozens of similar pieces and gave them all away. That was Corrine, Nolani said. She'd make something beautiful and just hand it to whoever was standing there. She didn't keep anything for herself. But she'd kept that piece, or it had been kept from her. Found on the floor of a hidden room, the last physical trace of a woman who had spent her life giving things away and had nothing left to give except a note stitched into neoprene with a bent fishhook, sent into a current that carried it 16 miles to a beach where a retired schoolteacher would find it 14 months later. The ocean gives things back. Kanahili had said that, early on, when she still believed the case was an accident and the sea would eventually return what it had taken. She was right, in a way she never intended. The ocean returned the note. It returned the wetsuit. It returned the truth, or part of it. Enough to know that Corrine Purcell did not drown, that she fought, that she was precise and deliberate in the face of something unimaginable, that she stitched a message into the lining of her own wetsuit and sent it out into the Pacific, like a voice calling across an impossible distance. But the ocean did not return Corrine. It did not return the name of the man who took her. It did not return the 15 to 20 words the salt water dissolved, the words that might have been a name, an identification, an answer. Somewhere, a man who was once called Russell Trask lives under a different name. He pays his bills. He keeps to himself. He is quiet and polite and forgettable, the kind of person you'd wave to in a parking lot, the kind you'd sit next to on a boat and never remember. He knows what happened in the water at the backside of Molokini. He knows what happened in the cottage in Napili. He knows the things the ocean erased. And Corrine's note sits in an evidence locker in Wailuku, sealed in plastic, the handwriting still small and steady, still precise, still unfinished. The last word still am, present tense. A verb of existence written by a woman who understood she was running out of time but refused in that final act to speak of herself in the past. I am, not I was. She gave herself that. Whatever else was taken from her, her husband, her freedom, her life, she gave herself that present tense, that insistence on existence, that refusal to be already gone. Manny Macedo keeps a copy of the note in his truck next to the photograph. He's read it so many times the photocopy is wearing thin along the folds. He told Kanahili once that he reads it not for the information, but for the handwriting, for the steadiness of it, for the proof that his daughter, in the worst moment of her life, did not shake. "That's my girl," he said. "That's Corrine, quiet on land. But you put her somewhere impossible, and she just opened up." He paused. The harbor was behind him. The boats were going out. "She's still out there," he said, not with hope, not with delusion, with something harder to name, a father's knowledge of his child, persisting past the point where knowledge can do any good. She's still out there, and someday the ocean's going to give her back too. He comes to the harbor every morning. He watches the boats. He waits. The ocean keeps its counsel. The note keeps its silence. The 15 missing words keep their secret.